Welcome back. The hashtags to use tonight on Twitter, hashtag checkpoint, hashtag endgame Somalia. And this is what we are receiving from you, your feedback already. Kenyan, you say corruption is the cause of everything. Compromised officers at the borders and immigration officers. A body party, you say no retreat in Somalia. The Kenyan soldiers must maintain order. We must not be seen as cowards. And this is our conversation tonight. To, of course, continue to send in your tweets and your comments. The number is 22155 on SMS. And let me introduce you to my panel tonight on Checkpoint. Moses Kuria, Fazul Mohammed, who's the chair of the Association of Muslim Organizations of Kenya, Professor Gitile Naituli, and Salah Abdi. We're going to get into this now. I'll start with you, Moses. Is it simplistic to say, let's remove our troops and all will be well? All those 80+ attacks we've seen will come to an end once our troops leave Somalia?
Actually, we need to have a perspective on this issue, Yvonne, because we did not start getting terror attacks in Kenya when we went to Somalia. In 1998, you remember 212 people died at the U.S. Embassy bombing. Kikambara in Mombasa after that. We've had various attacks before we went to Somalia. Number two, you've got to look at the fact that it is not only Kenya which is in Somalia. Actually, before we went to Somalia, we had the Ugandans, the Burundians, the Ethiopians, the Djiboutis, the Nigerians, the Sierra Leoneans. They are all there. It is only after 7 years that Kenya went in there. And the fact is that after Kenya went in there, the tide started turning. It was actually the game changer. Our entry of our forces into Somalia started changing the game. And that is when the Al-Shabaab felt that this is not the same enemy as they were facing before. And they started feeling the heat, and that heat was directed at Kenya. So the fact is that after 2011 and after Kenya went to Somalia, the Al-Shabaab came under intense pressure from the military front. And what you're finding now is that they know that if they break the resolve of Kenya, then they are going to be left in the same situation with armies that they can overrun, as was happening before 2011. So I consider it completely simplistic and actually naive to think that if we pull our forces from Somalia, that we are going to have peace in Kenya. The other thing is, don't forget that we didn't go for a picnic in Somalia. We didn't go for a holiday. We went in there because they were attacking our civilians. They were attacking our economic base, our tourists. They were abducting tourists and trying to mess the economic foundation of this country. So it's not we are not in Somalia because we want to be in Somalia. Remember that this is our first foreign military expedition.
That's right.
We've never done that before. So it's not out of choice, it's actually out of necessity.
Okay, all right. Professor, there's some, and I'd like you to react to that. First off, why is Kenya the scene of these attacks? There's others who are there. And do you believe this is our war to fight, Professor?
I think I want to correct something Moses said. The 1998 attack was not directed at Kenya. That attack was directed at America. Kenya was what they call collateral damage. It was just collateral damage. It was not directed at us. That is number one.
But it was done on Kenyan soil.
It was done on Kenyan soil. So we could say that. But I think we need to disentangle this thing so that we can decide whether we are fighting our war or somebody else's war.
So you believe we're in Somalia at somebody else's behest?
Now, this is a complicated question, really. But I think the degree of incursions before we went in, it didn't warrant, in my opinion, a full-blast entry into Somali clan warfare, which has been there for centuries.
Okay, Fazul, did we go into this understanding fully the situation in Somalia? Of course, there's, what's happening in Jubaland and Kenyans being, the Kenyan Defense Forces being accused of taking sides in Jubaland. Did we fully understand what was going on in Somalia?
Thank you very much. I believe Kenya went into Somalia with certain objectives. So unless those objectives are met, that's the only time that Kenya can withdraw. And number two, if you look at it, Ethiopia went into Somalia in 2006, in fact, even before AMISOM. AMISOM came and Ugandans came in 2007, Now the question is, Kenya there are other countries which went into Somalia, and why aren't they facing what Kenya is facing now?
Salah?
And number two, if you look at the border point, Kenya borders Somalia approximately 600 kilometers.
1,000.
Ethiopia borders 1,600 and something. That is almost 3 times what Kenya borders Somalia. So in essence, if we go into postulations, we will expect Ethiopia to suffer 3 times more attacks that we are suffering.
Why are we suffering more than the other countries, Salah?
I think this thing, first of all, has to have some sort of context and understanding. And I agree with the professor that we should not cherry pick things and then put them in terms of blow them up. Are we fighting a war that was ours, or are we fighting a war that is global under the Bush doctrine, which is, which was actually declared by Bush some years back? So that is the question that probably we need to answer. But okay, why are we suffering? That is a question that we cannot answer ourselves in the sense that probably we should ask the Ethiopians what they're doing right. The other thing is, okay, we went to Somalia. Did we actually have, he said we had objectives. If they were objectives, then they must have been secret. We didn't see the objectives. We went there, okay. The Kenya KDF did very well. They actually liberated the Kismayu, they put new administration. And then immediately, I remember Mukhisha Kitu actually wrote an article in which he praised the Kenya's invasion of that region. And then he said, let's get out while we are ahead. And that was, that was an advice which was not heeded. Because you have to have an objective. The objective was to chase these people out.
Yvonne, when I hear people say that we are blowing things up, we are not blowing things up. It is terrorists who are blowing our churches, our buses. You've got to remember that.
All right.
Yeah, we are being blown up in our churches and our buses.
indeed,
I think it's extremely insensitive.
Blowing things out of proportion is an English phrase. Moses, don't blow up. The idea is this. Blowing things up is an English phrase. I did not create it.
Moses,
I think Moses is out of order.
Moses, there's something he's saying that I really wish that we listen here very carefully. There is a major difference between us and Ethiopia. Ethiopia, they don't have the capacity to inflict the pain they're inflicting here.
Which is what
here, what has happened here is we are the author of our own misery. We allowed Al-Shabaab to load this country with its agents through corruption, through basically what I would call surrendering nationhood, because we granted a lot of them in 1992 IDs in order to vote in that election.
Okay.
Then in 97,
right.
Then the Nuzumukate government basically literally sold IDs.
So clearly there are internal issues. Fazul, you'd like to respond?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to respond to my colleague. He was saying that maybe he didn't know about the objectives why Kenya went into Somalia. I think the objectives are very clear. Kenya went into Somalia to protect its borders. We were facing threats from the Al-Shabaab and the destabilization in the neighborhood. So whether the destabilization is about Al-Shabaab or whatever, we were not interested. We went in to protect our security of our country.
But part of that, though, was to root out Al-Shabaab, which is a source of insecurity in the region.
And we did. Okay, we did.
But yet they are still here. We rooted them out of Somalia, but yet they're still here.
There was a very interesting cartoon that was drawn by somebody called Amin Amir, who is a Somali cartoonist. And he said while we were marching there, they were marching in. I think you have seen that cartoon. So the idea is this.
All right,
let's hear from Moses. I haven't said actually my point. Okay. Let me say my point, because I think Moses is a bit frontal. Let me just say my point. My point is, okay, we're always talking about Ethiopia doing something right. Did we ask Ethiopia what they do? Did we ask Ethiopia how they suffered in 2007? Did you actually ask them that they went into Somalia in 2006, came out in 2008 because of the problems they were facing? Okay. The Americans were there, they left.
Yes.
So Somalia has been at war for 20 years. Actually 23 years as per now.
All right.
And different interests have been there all the time.
Okay.
What makes Kenya...
What made it different?
What makes a difference for us?
Moses?
I think I want to agree with Professor Naituri on one thing, that we actually order of our own problems. And how are we the order of our own problems? 600,000 people from Somalia, we housed them. That is being order of our own problems, if that's how it was to be seen. That we are host to 600,000 people. That is a population of a country like Bahrain, for example. Yeah. And we become host to that country. So if we are being accused of suffering from problems of which we are made.
Okay.
It's because of our own generosity.
And the solution
it's because
to that,
of our own freedom.
absolutely.
A country that
I agree
allows
with you,
people
Moses.
to get ideas, to come and invest in this
There we
country.
go.
And
And
what
then
we
there
get
was
back,
Operation
we get
Usalama.
bombs, and we get being accused of not doing what Ethiopians did.
Okay.
It's really unfair.
All right, fair point. Then there was Operation
I
Usalama
think
Watch,
it's,
which then there was the idea of it being targeting certain people. Salah, I know you've been very vocal on this one. What then do you think? 600,000 people coming in, as Moses says, should we root them out?
The 600,000 people live in refugee camps. That's what he should know. Actually, the urban refugees are estimated around 50,000.
They are not living in the refugee camps.
Actually, they are. According to the official estimates.
The population in Somalia moved from 750,000 in the census of 1999 to nearly 3 million, 2.5 million last census, which the government rejected.
All right.
So these people are living among us,
I should be allowed to speak.
Okay, Salah,
Are we doing what we call just extrapolations, or are we taking official records?
Because what you're saying was rejected.
What he's saying was
Okay.
rejected.
So let's
Fine,
stick
that's
with what we
official
know.
records.
Okay.
But the official records are there are about 500,000 refugees in Kenya. That's a fact as he's tested. 500,000 actually live in Kakuma, Dadaab, and Rakhale. The people who are actually urban refugees are around 50,000, according to the Kenya government.
And so
when this
the
was done, when the operation was done, there was a problem of mixing two issues that are separate.
Which are?
Being refugees and being terrorists are different. Because who blew up Pangani police station? It's a Kenyan. According to the KTN reports, it's a Kenyan. Actually, they said of somebody who is son of official, in Kenya government.
Right.
So, are you telling us that being a refugee is equal to being a terrorist?
Fazul?
There are so many refugees everywhere in the world. Are they all terrorists? That is a question you have to answer.
I totally agree with Daktari. Being a refugee and being a terrorist are two different things. Criminality cannot be equal to being an alien, and from the official records that this professor was saying, that they were rejected by the National Bureau of Statistics, cannot be attributed because of the influx of refugees from Somalia. Number one, there are many other cultural things that can come into play. Somalis are polygamous, and Somalis have a lot of children, unlike other communities in Kenya.
Right.
And then what he didn't say, I'd like to point out this is, there were actually about 38,000 Somalis, not 750,000. According to the official records, there are 38,000 Somalis.
All right,
the
so
problem is Kenya has 42 tribes. Of those 42 tribes, 8 of them are Somalis. You treat each Somali clan as a tribe in Kenya.
Really?
So if you look, if you look at the official records, there were only 38,000 Somalis in 1999. So you're telling us
because I think we're getting lost in the numbers here.
I think we are getting
Moses,
lost
we're
here.
getting lost in the numbers. Moses?
Let me state our initial, my own belief, my own thinking, is that Operation Usalama Watch is not an operation against any ethnic community in Kenya. Neither is it an operation against any religion. I am not saying that it's an operation that every refugee is a criminal, but I do know that the government of Kenya has gazetted Kakuma and Dadaab as the only refugee centers where, whether it's 50,000 or 500,000, no refugee has got any business being in our urban centers. And by the way, it is a burden that we continue to shoulder. The Kenya government, Somalia government, and the UNHCR have signed a tripartite agreement for returning all these refugees to Somalia.
Allow me to
I think we need to get to that point. Then only after we do something called by elimination, then we start seeing we have returned all the 650,000 refugees from Dadaab and Kakuma to Somalia, and we still have a problem. Then we'll see.
And then, all right. But let me shift the discussion a little bit. Would you think that what we've done so far in Somalia is bearing results? And I'll tell you why. MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, announced it was leaving Somalia after decades of being there and providing humanitarian aid, which was part of the aims of AMISOM, to make sure that the place was secure enough to allow humanitarian aid to access the area. But MSF has announced they're leaving, and this is what they say, and I quote, "Untenable balance between the risks and compromises our staff make in our ability to provide assistance to the Somali people." In essence, saying that MSF feel that their staff are not safe. When we hear statements like this, can we then term our engagement in Somalia under AMISOM a success if MSF is leaving after decades, Moses?
Perhaps not a success, but ask yourself, if MSF is leaving Somalia because they feel unsafe, is the solution to get those people who are still sticking their necks out there, to get them back home, and get, if MSF is leaving and KDF is there and AMISOM is there, Now start to imagine yourself, if we don't have any KDF, if we don't have any Amazons, if we don't have the police unit that Nigeria and Sierra Leone have provided, then what's going to happen even to the UN and to the other bodies that are trying to do some work?
That was one of the aims of it, and if after all this time MSF still
actually that is a proof.
Excuse
me, Professor. That is an answer to your question. It is not yet time to leave Somalia. The job is not yet
I think
done.
we're losing part of the discussion.
I think
the question that was coming is, I don't think whether Kenya should actually leave, run away like as if they are being chased by some enemy.
So what would the exit plan look like for you, Sarah?
I am sure the people who made the decision to take KDF there had an exit plan. What would it look like? It would look like one. They must have had a set of goals that they wanted to achieve, and probably they were confidential because I didn't hear about them. Nobody wrote about them. Everybody was just speculating about them. So there must be some set of deliverables that we need to achieve. Okay.
And if those have not been delivered yet, then we should continue to be there?
Should we? Okay. It's tricky actually. Pride at stake.
Okay.
Now running away is not going to be one of the solutions.
Professor, what would it sound like to you? What would the exit? Because I know you've said here on Checkpoint before we had no business being in Somalia. Fine, we've crossed that bridge. We're there already. What would the exit plan look like for you?
I'm not so sure if we have an exit plan from Somalia, because I also not convinced that there was an entry strategy into Somalia, because our Zabab was told us when we entered Somalia that we are chasing the tail in Somalia when the hand is in Nairobi, is in Kenya. And then given all these attacks, it appears to me the hand is here. We are dealing with the people, in my opinion, who are just complicated. These people have never been stable. They fight without a station, they kill without mercy, and they die without regret. And then you tell me you are going to stabilize those people. Because we are using wrong language here, okay? These people cannot be stabilized, and I think Kenyans should come, bring their troops back here, close the border with Somalia, go look for money and defense that border, and wash it, so that we can protect ourselves. It's going to be very handy for us to protect ourselves against people who want to die.
Moses?
I think, we cannot give in to terrorists. That's number one. And Professor, let me tell you something. When you say that if we didn't go to Somalia, we could maybe have some peace. You cannot have an MOU signed in Somalia with terrorists. It cannot happen. You cannot determine the rules. The rules cannot be determined by you. As you correctly put it, these are terrorists. And by the way, sometimes it's better to die on your feet than to live on your knees. So if you imagine, because these people, they are happy to die, other countries have faced terrorism. Now what we are facing now is realizing that Kenya is on the front line of terrorism. And let me put something Yvonne, very important. These things are not mutually exclusive. Operation Linda Inchi, the one in Somalia, Operation Usalama Watch, which is in Kenya, and the operation to actually secure our borders. Those three things will go together
very quickly,
in parallel at the same time.
Moses, I just want to give you an example.
Okay.
I think we need to learn from other people, okay? Because they say that the clever people learn from history. History means other people have gone through an experience and we don't have to repeat it. We are making a mistake that the Israelis made in Lebanon. The Israelis entered Lebanon in an attempt to make a bargain between them and the Palestinians. They ended up creating Isobalah, the part of God, and they had to leave. What we are doing here, the Tanzanians refuse to go into Somalia because they know they are dealing with an uncontrollable population. Okay, the Somalians are good people, honestly, and we have made a contribution. They're enjoying some peace. But the Somalis, the way they have been during the colonial days, the way they have been during Iyad Barre, you have to remember they are the only country which invented other countries after independence. They invented Uganda in Ethiopia. They sent mercenaries in northern Kenya to fight us here as shifters.
All right.
These are difficult.
Your point is well understood, but before that, Salah, Fazul, let's just give you a chance to weigh in on this one.
Thank you. Certainly, for a military to go into a foreign land, they must have an entry strategy. And the exit strategy might change with time, depending on whether the goals have been achieved or not.
But certainly they cannot be there indefinitely.
Yes, certainly. At some point in time, they will certainly have to leave. But you know, there's what in military there's what we call the strategic retreat. When you go like Ethiopians did, they went in and then they were overwhelmed.
Yes.
They went back, went back on the drawing board, redrew their strategy, and then went back again. Certainly, Kenya, we have not reached at that point, and this is AMISOM. We are under an umbrella of African Mission, and I think the problem that we have now is maybe it was supposed to be done at that particular time when Operation Linda Inchi went into Somalia. Then Operation Usalama, which was supposed to be done in Kenya simultaneously at the same time. Yes,
it was actually done in Kenya at the time of entry. It was actually done.
No, it was not. It was not.
An operation was done then. If you actually read the reporting of that time, there was an operation. They actually did it in Kenya. There was a search of everybody's houses. They even came to my house.
They never did.
We were there, and I think we can attest to that. And there was an operation which, you know, there was a swoop and all that. But then let's come to the reality. The reality is this, Professor. I agree with you. We should be out of that place. Yes. How do we do it? Do we run at night? Do we or you create circumstances under which you can actually move out?
Okay.
Because you have to have a strategy of getting out. So when you are moving in there, you must have had a bit of goals that you wanted to achieve.
All right.
And the way I read some of the reports, like International Crisis Group was saying, was to actually secure Kismayo and give it to a local administration. That has happened. So what should have happened is a year or so later we should have been out of Somalia. You understand?
Can I say this?
We have our final
we should not actually rush out of it, but we should have a strategy which is either
and you don't believe that strategy exists?
I'm not sure it exists, but I haven't seen one. So there should be either a phased withdrawal or a way of claiming victory. Understand? You can't just run out.
But you'd have to claim victory with results, though, wouldn't you? Let's have your final
comment.
Yes.
One, Kenya will start down in Somalia, and it will start down when the Somalis stand up. When the Sudanese Somali government and their army stands up, the Kenyan army will start down. We are not there for fun. We have got better things to do in this country. Number two, it's very important that we do realize what is the objective of Al-Shabaab. The objective of Al-Shabaab will not end when we get back out of Somalia, because their objective is to create what they call the East African Caliphate. And you remember the people who are the leaders of the East African Caliphate went to the Umar University in Sudan. I'm sure there's no relation with your university, but you know there has been. I'm glad. This is also an ideological.
You have just mentioned somebody's university without any.
No, this is an ideological. It's an ideological as much as it is a military war. That these people want to create the East African Caliphate. They want to do what's happening in Nigeria, where they are stopping children, schoolgirls from going to school. And I think we have a country. We have built it over time. We fought for our constitution because we cherish our liberties and our freedoms, and simply because somebody wants us to get out of Somalia does not mean we are going to sacrifice our freedoms.
All right, as we close, Fazul, we obviously have to acknowledge the fact that terrorist attacks have increased since our engagement in Somalia. It didn't start with our operation in Somalia, but they have considerably increased from 1998, surely, and now about 87 since then. So what is the solution to this? If there is an exit strategy, which we hope there is, because we cannot be there indefinitely, what would it look like for you?
Maybe before I go into the exit strategy, the solution, KDF are doing their part in Somalia. The solution lies here in this country. For example, in the Operation Usalama Watch, that operation the people leading that operation should be people who understand the terrain. For example, the person who kicked out shifters in Northeastern was Ali Mahmoud. Salah Mahmoud.
Yes.
You know that guy, the current Kenyan ambassador to Saudi Arabia. That guy was amongst the Somalis, and he was put there in the Northeastern province as the provincial police commissioner, and he weeded out these people. Who kicked out Mungiki was Kikuyu, Michuki, the late Michuki. You know, so. When we are doing this thing in Isili, for example, why don't we have a deputy county commissioner who is a Somali, who understands, who even from the physical accent of somebody talks, they can differentiate. This is a Somali from Somalia, this is a Somali from Kenya, this is Somali from Ethiopia, this is Somali from Mombasa, you know, somebody who understands. Yes, the OCPD in Pangani needs to be also somebody who the people can relate with, the intelligence.
Are you saying that it is a Somali problem?
No, it is not a Somali problem, but certainly we cannot run away from this fact that all these explosions are associated with Al-Shabaab, who are mainly ethnic Somalis or Muslim or something like that. So we need people. Yeah, the Provincial Commission in Northeastern needs to be a Somali, for example, to handle that matter. Yes, right. So it has worked elsewhere worldwide, and it can also work in Kenya.
Okay, and he's raising some important points, which many of our viewers are raising on Twitter, saying the problem actually isn't with our troops in Somalia, it's with our intelligence forces here, it's with corruption within our police force. Is that somewhere else we should also be looking at strengthening as you close?
Yeah, it's also, I think the government also needed to get serious on this war. They are not serious. I heard a national politician the other day, the former speaker, deputy speaker, say on national television that the government was exploding bombs in his lee, and he was not given an opportunity to table his evidence in court. Because
so
in a state of war, he should have been arrested, he should have been charged, and then he should have that would have provided him with an opportunity to table that evidence. It did not happen. That is how war loans are created, by impunity. So this government need to know that we are at war. This is war. They also, this superficial thing of asking people for IDs, I also think it needs to be set aside.
What do you think should be done?
The government is very easy to identify the Somalis from Somalia, from our brothers who are Somalis in Kenya. Very easy. The Somali never had vaccination campaigns because they have no government. So when you look here, the team being job is a fantastic identification for the Kenyans against the ones who were importing from Somalia.
Okay.
So we need, the other one is really we need a strategy to get out of Somalia so that we don't look like an occupational force.
For you, should that happen sooner? Later?
It needs to happen. There's no.
Do you think we have achieved the objectives in Somalia yet?
The ego of saying that we are not going to cut and run, we need to transcend that.
Okay.
There's no. We can't. You see, it is too. This thing is becoming too expensive for us. We can't even afford it, and frankly, I don't believe Somalia is worth it. If you are telling me we are going to Uganda to stabilize Uganda, I will tell you send the entire Kenyan force in Kenya. Because Uganda is very valuable to us, the biggest trading partner.
Okay,
but in Somalia,
you don't
we
think
have not calculated the cost.
Salah, finally.
Okay, I think there is a problem of one, misinformation. Most of Kenyans think that issues of terrorism is related to the Somalis. It is not. The people who were convicted of terrorism so far, I think very few were, almost none were Somalis. So I think you should have to look at a bigger problem rather than focusing on a small
And what is the bigger problem for you that we need to solve?
I think before I come to that, I think you have to separate the two issues. Being a refugee is you're running away from war, you're running away from hunger, you're looking for asylum. You're not looking for explosions and war. You actually run away from one. So putting together the issue of terrorism and refugeeism, I think was a very wrong strategy in the first place.
I'm sorry, Salah, I've got to rush you. I must conclude.
Thirdly, should Kenya have an exit strategy from Somalia? I think that should have been there in day one. It's not something that should even be discussed at this point. It should have been there from day one.
And you believe that
we should have
once
been
we exit,
and we should have been out of that place in the first year.
Okay.
I think so.
Yvonne, what happened to the anti-terror law?
We have to close our discussion. Some important points being raised, and we will definitely continue this discussion. I'd like to thank each of you for making the time to be here as we discuss the security situation in Kenya and indeed what happens in Somalia and how that affects us here. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for that checkpoint. We're taking a short break. We'll be back with more. Keep your comments coming in. #EndgameSomalia.